Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new What If. Today we're going to talk about what would happen if Yamato went to Marineford to rescue Ace. Grab your snacks and settle in. They say that destiny is absolute and that some fates are carved in stone. But what happens when a wolf tears through its chains to rewrite history? Imagine a world where the Paramount War didn't just feature the Whitebeard pirates and a falling Straw Hat Luffy, but also the thunderous roar of the Oni princess charging into hell itself. This is the story of a promise kept, a bond that transcended the sea, and the day Yamato arrived at Marineford to save Fire Fist Ace. The wind over Onigashima was always cold, carrying the scent of ash and oppression. But for Yamato, the true chill came from the small piece of paper resting in the palm of her hand. It was the Vivre card Ace had given her years ago, a burning promise of their reunion. For years, it had been vibrant and whole, pulsing with the life force of the man who had first shown her what freedom tasted like. But today, the paper was not just smoldering, it was vanishing. The edges were curling into nothingness, burning away at a terrifying speed. Every flake of ash that drifted into the wind felt like a second of Ace's life slipping away. Yamato stood frozen near the edge of the skull dome, her heart hammering against her ribs like a war drum. He was dying. The only friend who had ever looked past the horns in the name of Kaido to see the person beneath was dying. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her discipline. She remembered his smile, the way he spoke of his little brother Luffy, and the stories of the sea that painted a world she had only dreamed of reading in Odin's journal. If that paper disappeared completely, Ace would be gone forever. The realization snapped something inside her. It was not a conscious decision, but a primal instinct. The chains that bound her to this island, the explosive cuffs that had been her shackles for 20 years, suddenly felt insignificant compared to the weight of losing him. She gripped her kanabo, Takeru, her knuckles turning white. She did not care about the consequences anymore. She did not care about the plan, the rebellion, or the long wait for the dawn of Wano. If the dawn meant a world without Ace, then she would burn the night down herself to save him. Yamato turned her back on the view of the flower capital and sprinted towards the port. Her heavy footsteps cracked the stone floor, echoing through the empty halls of the Skull Dome. Beast pirates, drunk and unsuspecting, barely had time to register the blur of white and red rushing past them before they were sent flying by the sheer wind pressure of her movements. She needed a ship, any ship. But the path to freedom was never unguarded. As she burst through the massive torii gates leading to the harbor, a shadow fell over her, massive and suffocating. The air grew heavy, charged with purple lightning. There stood Kaido. The strongest creature in the world blocked her path, his massive kanabo resting on his shoulder, his eyes narrowing as he looked down at his child. He did not need to ask where she was going. The desperation in her eyes and the burning paper in her hand told him everything. He rumbled a low laugh that shook the ground. He asked if she was finally running away to chase a ghost, mocking the friendship she held so dear. He told her that pirates betray one another and that the son of Roger was destined to die, just as she was destined to rule Wano under his command. The words, which usually struck fear into her, now only fueled a blazing inferno of rage. Yamato did not stop. She did not hesitate. For the first time, she did not look at him as a father or an emperor, but as the only obstacle between her and Ace. She roared back that he knew nothing of freedom or friendship. The air crackled as she engaged her hybrid form, her teeth sharpening, frost spreading across her skin. She launched herself at him, swinging her weapon with every ounce of haki she possessed. The clash of their weapons created a shockwave that shattered the surrounding crates and sent the lesser pirates scrambling for cover. This was not a duel for honor. It was a desperate breakout. Kaido was surprised by the sheer ferocity of her strike. It wasn't the calculated rebellion he was used to. It was the frantic, lethal strength of a cornered beast. He swung back, his thunder bagua meeting hers, sending her skidding back across the pavement, blood trickling from her forehead. But Yamato did not stay down. She looked at the handcuffs, the metal bands that had kept her prisoner for 2 decades. Kaido warned her that if she left the island, they would blow her arms off. It was the threat that had always worked. But today, Yamato looked at the burning Vivre card, now less than half its original size. Losing her arms was a price she was willing to pay if it meant keeping her soul. With a scream that echoed across the entire island, she coated her arms in the thickest layer of armament haki she could muster. She grabbed the chains and pulled. She pulled with the strength of Odin, with the will of a samurai. She didn't wait for them to trigger. She ripped at them, channeling her internal destruction haki, the technique she had read about in the journal, the flow of Ryu. The metal groaned, sparked, and then, with a blinding flash, the cuffs detonated. The explosion was massive, engulfing the harbor in smoke and fire. Kaido shielded his eyes, frowning. For a moment, silence reigned. Had she been foolish enough to kill herself? But then, from the smoke, a figure emerged. Yamato stood panting, her arms scorched and bleeding, her kimono tattered, but her hands were still attached. She had done it. She had forced the blast outward at the last second. She was free. Without giving Kaido a chance to recover from his shock, she leaped onto one of the fast scout ships docked at the pier. She didn't know how to navigate perfectly, but she knew the direction. The Viver card was pulling her towards the southeast, towards the greatest war the world had ever seen. As the ship tore away from the coast of Wano, leaving a stunned emperor behind, Yamato didn't look back. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon. "Hang on, Ace," she whispered to the wind. "I am coming." The journey was a blur of anxiety. Every hour felt like a decade. The ocean was vast and cruel, and Yamato pushed the stolen ship to its breaking point. She barely ate, barely slept. Her eyes were glued to the Viver card. It was shrinking faster now. He was in critical danger. As she approached the currents leading to the gates of justice, she could hear it. The distant rumble of cannons. The sky ahead was painted in unnatural colors, flashes of light and darkness clashing. She was late. The battle had already begun. She needed to bypass the currents. She didn't have the clearance, but she had brute force. When a marine battleship tried to intercept her, signaling for her to halt, she didn't even slow down. She leaped from her ship to theirs, a blur of white fur and cold fury. She didn't kill them, but she incapacitated the crew in seconds, seizing their eternal pose and forcing the navigator to take her straight into the bay. She could feel the hockey collisions from miles away. Monsters were fighting there. Meanwhile, at Marineford, the situation was dire. The ice plaza was stained with blood. Whitebeard, the strongest man in the world, was taking heavy damage. The admirals were relentless. Luffy had fallen from the sky, bringing chaos with him, but he was struggling. He was exhausted, pushing his body beyond its limits, driven only by the same desperation that fueled Yamato. Ace was on the execution platform, forced to watch his family die for him. The executioners raised their blades. Sengoku was shouting orders. The atmosphere was thick with despair. It felt like the end of an era. Luffy was running across the ice, but Kizaru, the Light Admiral, moved to intercept him. A beam of light shot towards the Straw Hat, too fast for him to dodge in his weakened state. It seemed over. But suddenly, the sky darkened. It wasn't a cloud, it was a presence. A massive pressure descended upon the battlefield, heavy and ancient, distinct from Whitebeard's tremors or the Admiral's elemental power. It felt wild. From the top of the massive ice wall created by Aokiji, a silhouette appeared. Everyone looked up. The Marines, the pirates, the Shichibukai. Even Garp paused. The figure leaped. It was a jump of impossible height. As gravity took hold, the figure spun, a massive iron club coated in black lightning swinging down. The attack wasn't aimed at Kizaru, but at the execution platform's defenses, clearing a path. Yamato landed with a crash that shattered the ice, creating a crater 50 meters wide. Dust and ice shards flew into the air. The impact blew the lower-ranking Marines away like leaves in a hurricane. As the dust settled, the battlefield fell into a stunned silence. Who was this? Another ally of Whitebeard? A new warlord? Standing in the center of the crater was a tall woman with horns, her hair fading from white to teal and blue, wearing the attire of a samurai and massive purple and white rope knots on her back. She breathed out a cloud of cold air, her golden eyes locking instantly onto the execution platform. She saw him, battered, bruised, but alive. Ace's eyes widened in disbelief. He whispered her name, thinking it was a hallucination brought on by death. Yamato. Sengoku stared down, his glasses flashing. He recognized the horns. He recognized the aura. The realization hit him with the force of a cannonball. "That isn't just a pirate," he muttered, his voice carrying over the Den Mushis. "That is the offspring of Kaido of the Beasts. Why is she here?" The murmur spread like wildfire. Kaido's daughter? Here? Was the Beast Emperor coming too? Panic began to set in among the Marines. If two emperors were to join forces here, the Navy was finished. But Yamato ignored the whispers. She ignored the Admiral staring her down. She raised her club, pointing it directly at the execution stand, her voice clear and ringing with absolute conviction. She shouted that she had not waited in chains for 20 years to watch her friend die. She declared that she was Yamato, and she was here to break these chains too. Luffy, who was picking himself up from the ice nearby, looked at her, confused but sensing an ally. He asked who she was. Yamato looked at Luffy, seeing the resemblance to Ace, and gave him a fierce grin. She told him she was the one who was going to help him save his brother. The war had shifted. The arrival of a combatant capable of stalling Kaido changed the power dynamic instantly. Akainu, sitting on his chair, narrowed his eyes. He grunted that another sinner had arrived to be purged, magma dripping from his fist. But Yamato was fresh. She wasn't tired like Whitebeard or exhausted like Luffy. She was at full power, and she was angry. She turned to Luffy and told him to go. She would clear the path. Before Kizaru could fire another laser, Yamato moved. She used the Thunder Bagua, moving so fast she left an afterimage. She clashed with the Admiral, her Haki-infused weapon holding back the light. The shockwave blew the surrounding soldiers away. "Go, Luffy!" she screamed. Luffy didn't waste the chance. He sprinted past the admirals, trusting the stranger with his life. Yamato stood her ground, facing the might of the Navy's greatest powers. This was where she belonged, not in a cave, in Wano, but here, fighting for the people she loved. She took a deep breath, entering her hybrid form fully, the mythical wolf deity revealing itself to the world. She howled, a sound that chilled the blood of every marine present. The ice around her began to freeze over even harder. She was the guardian deity of Wano, and today, she was the guardian of Fire Fist Ace. The battle reignited with twice the intensity. Whitebeard laughed, seeing the chaos. He didn't know this girl, but he liked her spirit. He ordered his sons to back her up. Marco flew down, transforming into a phoenix, flanking Yamato. The combination of mythical Zoans, the phoenix, and the wolf created a wall of defense that the Marines couldn't easily break. But the goal was still the platform. Yamato knew she couldn't fight three admirals forever. She needed to get to Ace. She fought with a fluid grace, mixing her brute strength with the samurai techniques she had mimicked from Odin. She was a whirlwind of destruction. When Aokiji tried to freeze her, she shattered the ice with a vibration of her haki. When Akainu launched a magma hound, she countered with a blast of holy fire from her mouth, the Namuji Hyoga. Ice and fire clashed, creating a thick steam that covered the plaza. Through the mist, she saw Garp. The hero of the Marines stood in front of the execution stand, the final guardian. Yamato felt a pang of hesitation. Ace had spoken of his grandfather with a mix of annoyance and love, but there was no room for hesitation now. She charged up the ice ramp created by Inazuma, running side by side with Luffy. Garp looked at them. His fists were clenched. He was torn between duty and family. But seeing Yamato, a wild card he hadn't anticipated, hardened his resolve. He couldn't let pirates do as they pleased. Yamato sensed the danger. Garp was on a different level. She grabbed Luffy by the back of his vest and threw him forward, shouting for him to save Ace while she dealt with the hero. It was a reckless move. She was throwing herself into the path of the man who had cornered Gold Roger. Garp punched, a simple, non-devil fruit punch that carried the weight of mountains. Yamato met it with her club. The impact was deafening. The ground beneath them collapsed. Yamato coughed up blood, her arms shaking. This was the power of the old era. But she didn't step back. She dug her heels into the crumbling stone. She told Garp to move, her eyes glowing. She said that a grandfather should not stand in the way of his grandson's life. Garp's eyes widened for a fraction of a second. The words struck him harder than the club. In that moment of distraction, Luffy slipped past. He was on the platform. The executioners swung their blades, but Crocodile, intervening from a distance, took them out. The key was lost, destroyed by Kizaru's stray laser. But Mr. 3 was there, disguised. It was chaos. But amidst the chaos, the shackles clicked open. Ace stood up. Fire erupted around him, forming a pillar of flame that reached the sky. He was free. Yamato, down in the crater struggling against Garp, looked up and smiled through the blood on her face. He was free. But the war wasn't over. In fact, the most dangerous part was just beginning. Akainu was not going to let them leave. The Magma Admiral stared at the two brothers and the Wolf Princess with a hateful glare. He stepped forward, the ground melting beneath his boots. The escape would be harder than the rescue. And Yamato, battered from her clash with Garp, now had to ensure they got out alive. The shackles hit the ice with a sound that rang sweeter than any victory bell. For a split second, the war seemed to pause. The collective breath of thousands held in suspension as the Fire Fist stood tall, flames dancing across his shoulders like a cloak of royalty. Yamato, wiping the blood from her lip where Garp's fist had connected, felt a surge of joy so intense it nearly brought her to her knees. This was it. This was the moment she had defied her father and the world for. Ace was free. But the battlefield was a living, breathing beast, and it did not allow for celebration. The Marines, recovering from the shock, roared in a collective wave of fury. They could not let the bloodline of the Pirate King escape. Cannonballs rained down, and bullets filled the air like a swarm of angry hornets. But now, the dynamic had shifted. It wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. It was a counterattack. Ace and Luffy fell into a perfect rhythmic synchronization. Fire and rubber moved in tandem, blasting away Marines with a seamless efficiency that spoke of a bond forged in childhood. And joining them was the wolf. Yamato, despite her injuries, forced her body to move. She swung her kanabo, creating gusts of freezing wind that created pathways through the wall of soldiers. The trio was a terrifying force of nature. Fire, ice, and raw kinetic power tearing through the heart of the Navy's headquarters. Whitebeard, watching from the rear, let out a booming laugh, though blood leaked from the corners of his mouth. His time was ending. He knew it. His organs were failing, and his wounds were fatal. But his family was safe. He slammed the bottom of his Bacento into the ice, the vibration cracking the island itself, creating a massive chasm between his sons and the pursuing Navy. He gave the final order, his voice cutting through the noise of war like a thunderclap. He told them to go, to leave him behind, for there was no ship in the new era capable of carrying him. It was a heartbreaking command, a father sacrificing himself so his children could live. Yamato stopped running for a moment, looking back at the colossal figure of Edward Newgate. She saw the way his crew looked at him, with tears, with love, with absolute loyalty. It was a stark, painful contrast to the father she had known. Kaido ruled through fear and strength. Whitebeard ruled through heart. In that moment, watching a dying old man hold back an entire army for the sake of his sons, Yamato understood what true strength was. It wasn't about being the strongest creature. It was about being a shield for what you treasure. She grit her teeth, tears welling in her eyes, and turned back to Ace. "We have to go!" she shouted over the roar of cannons. "Don't let his sacrifice be in vain!" Ace hesitated. His body was trembling. To leave his pops behind tore at his soul. But he saw Luffy pushing forward. He saw Yamato urging him, and he nodded. They ran. They ran towards the captured battleships, the path to freedom agonizingly close. But fate is a cruel writer, and the story was not done twisting. From the chaos behind them, a voice dripped with malice, cutting through the emotional farewell. Admiral Akainu had not given up. He stepped over the bodies of fallen pirates, his arm dripping with molten rock. He didn't attack them physically. He attacked them psychologically. He called Whitebeard a failure from a bygone era, a loser who gathered trash and played house. It was a cheap taunt, a transparent bait. Yamato saw it for what it was. She knew the mind games of tyrants. She had lived with Kaido. She reached out to grab Ace's arm to pull him forward. "Ignore him, Ace," she warned, her voice desperate. "He's trying to stop you. Just keep running." But Ace was a man of pride, and he loved Whitebeard more than he loved his own life. He stopped. The fire around him flared up, turning from orange to an angry red. He turned back, his face twisted in rage. He demanded Akainu take back his words. Yamato cursed under her breath. The script of destiny was trying to pull them back into the tragedy. She skidded to a halt, turning her massive frame to face the Admiral alongside Ace. "If he fights, I fight," she decided instantly. She wouldn't let him face a monster like Sakazuki alone. Akainu sneered, pleased that his words had found their mark. He launched himself forward, his fist turning into a massive hound of magma. Ace countered, his fist turning into a tunnel of fire. Fire against magma. In the laws of this world, magma smothered fire. The impact threw Ace back. His hand burned, the heat overwhelming his Logia intangibility. He crashed into the ground, gasping. Akainu didn't stop to gloat. He was a machine of absolute justice. His eyes shifted. He saw Luffy, exhausted and kneeling, looking at Ace's Vivre card that had fallen onto the concrete. The card was whole again, but Luffy was vulnerable. The Admiral changed targets mid-stride. He ignored the recovering Ace and lunged for the future threat, the Son of Dragon. It happened in slow motion. Luffy couldn't dodge. Ace saw it. He scrambled to his feet, diving to put his body between the magma and his little brother. It was the moment history recorded as the death of Fire Fist Ace. But history didn't account for the Oni Princess. Yamato had been watching Akainu with the instincts of a predator. She saw the shift in his gaze before he even moved. She knew he would target the weak link. She was already moving before Ace even screamed. She didn't try to pull Luffy away. There wasn't time. She didn't try to attack Akainu. It wouldn't stop the momentum. Instead, she utilized a technique she had developed to survive Kaido's thunderous beatings. Mirror Mountain. Yamato threw herself in front of Luffy, just as Ace dove in from the side. But because of her speed and reach, she got there a fraction of a second faster. She encased her entire torso in a thick, diamond-hard layer of reflective ice armor. Akainu's magma fist, carrying the weight of annihilation, slammed into Yamato's chest. The sound was sickening. The hiss of ice instantly sublimating into steam, the crack of armor breaking, and the wet thud of impact. But the fist did not punch through. The mythical ice of the Okuchi no Makami was the natural antithesis to heat. It didn't stop the force, but it blunted the piercing power. The impact launched Yamato backward, and she collided with Ace, who was mid-air. The two of them were sent tumbling across the plaza, crashing into a pile of rubble near the water's edge. Luffy screamed, his eyes wide with horror. Yamato! Ace! Steam rose from the crater where they had landed. Akainu stood there, his magma arm smoking, looking mildly annoyed. He had missed the kill shot. He prepared to fire another volley, a rain of volcanic fists to finish the job. But suddenly, blue flames erupted around him. Marco the Phoenix kicked the Admiral back, his face twisted in protective fury. Vista the Flower Sword joined him, his blades coated in haki. The commanders were rallying. They wouldn't let the Admiral take another step. In the rubble, Ace was coughing violently. He was bruised, but he was alive without a hole in his chest. He frantically looked next to him. Yamato lay on her back, her breathing shallow. The ice armor on her chest had shattered completely, and underneath, her skin was angrily red, burned severely by the proximity to the magma. But she was conscious. She coughed, wincing in pain, clutching her chest. "That was hot," she wheezed, forcing a pained grin. Ace stared at her, his hands trembling as he hovered them over her injury, afraid to touch. You jumped in. Why? You idiot, why?" Yamato grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong despite the pain. "Because we made a promise," she rasped. "And because I'm not letting my friend die on the day I finally got free. Now, help me up, Ace. We aren't done yet." The sight of her, burned, bleeding, but smiling, snapped something into place for Ace. The reckless rage he felt towards Akainu vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. He had almost died. He had almost left Luffy alone, and Yamato had paid the price for his lack of control. He couldn't waste this second chance. He helped Yamato to her feet, slinging her arm over his shoulder. He looked at Luffy, who was crying with relief. "Run," Ace commanded, his voice steady. "We are leaving. Now." This time, there was no hesitation. When Akainu shouted more insults about Whitebeard, calling him a coward, Ace didn't stop. He grit his teeth, tears streaming down his face, acknowledging the truth in his heart. Whitebeard was a great man, and the only way to honor him was to survive. The trio moved towards the bay, but the escape was far from guaranteed. The plaza was collapsing. Whitebeard, seeing his sons moving away, unleashed his final devastating power. He split Marineford in two, separating the pirates from the Marines, creating a physical barrier with the sea itself. He stood alone on the other side, a dying giant facing the entire navy. Yamato looked back one last time through the dust and chaos. She saw the old man smiling. He had done it. He had saved the future. Just as they reached the water's edge, the surface broke. A yellow submarine surfaced like a metallic whale. The hatch flew open, and Trafalgar Law stepped out, looking bored but intense. "Get in!" he shouted. "I'm a doctor!" They didn't ask questions. They leaped. Ace and Luffy landed on the deck, pulling the injured Yamato with them. As the hatch sealed and the submarine dove into the dark depths of the ocean, the sounds of the war, the screams, the cannons, the arrival of Blackbeard, became muffled and distant. They were safe. Inside the sterile metal hallway of the Polar Tang, the adrenaline finally crashed. Luffy collapsed instantly, passing out from sheer exhaustion and trauma. Ace slid down the wall, his head in his hands, the weight of the day pressing down on him. Yamato sat opposite him, leaning against the cold steel, wincing as Law's crew rushed over to treat her burns. The room was silent for a long time, save for the hum of the engine. Finally, Ace looked up. His eyes were red, but they were alive. "You saved me," he whispered, as if he still couldn't believe it. "You really came." Yamato looked at the ceiling, thinking of the chains, the hunger, the 20 years of waiting in the dark. She looked at Ace, then at the sleeping Luffy. A tear traced a path through the soot on her cheek. She smiled, and this time, it wasn't a mask of bravado. It was genuine peace. "I told you, Ace," she said softly. "I read Odin's journal. I knew the adventure was waiting. I just didn't know the adventure was you guys." They had survived Marineford. The world had shifted on its axis. Whitebeard was dead. The era was changing. But Firefist Ace was alive, and the Straw Hat Pirates had just gained an ally with the strength of an emperor. The government had failed. And somewhere in the New World, Kaido crushed a sake cup in his hand, realizing that his bird had not just flown the coop, she had burned the coop down. But as the submarine navigated the deep currents, a new question arose. Where do they go from here? Ace couldn't go back to the Whitebeard remnants immediately. He was too broken. Luffy needed to train, he was too weak, and Yamato. Yamato was a fugitive with a bounty that would likely skyrocket overnight. The concept hung in the air even before Rayleigh suggested it. They needed to get stronger. But in this timeline, the training wouldn't just be Luffy on Rusukaina. Imagine the Dark King Rayleigh, training not just the Monkey Prince, but the son of Roger and the daughter of Kaido. The power balance of the world wasn't just going to tip, it was going to shatter.